Virginia Woolf, A Haunted House, narrated by Kathy Slump. Whatever hour you woke, there was a door shutting. From room to room they went, hand in hand, lifting here, opening there, making sure. A ghostly couple. "Here we left it," she said. And he added, "Oh, but here too." "It's upstairs," she murmured. "And in the garden," he whispered. "Quietly," they said, "or we shall wake them." "But it wasn't that you woke us. Oh, no. They're looking for it. They're drawing the curtain," one might say, and so read on a page or two. "Now they've found it," one would be certain, stopping the pencil on the margin. And then, tired of reading, one might rise and see for oneself the house all empty, the doors standing open, only the wood pigeons bubbling with content, and the hum of the threshing machine sounding from the farm. What did I come in here for? What did I want to find? My hands were empty. Perhaps it's upstairs then. The apples were in the loft. And so down again, the garden still as ever, only the book had slipped into the grass. But they had found it in the drawing room. Not that one could ever see them. The window panes reflected apples, reflected roses. All the leaves were green in the glass. If they moved in the drawing room, the apple only turned its yellow side. Yet, the moment after, if the door was opened, spread about the floor, hung upon the walls, pendant from the ceiling. What? My hands were empty. The shadow of a thrush crossed the carpet. From the deepest wells of silence, the wood pigeon drew its bubble of sound. Safe, 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 the pulse of the house beat softly. The treasure buried, the room, the pulse stopped short. Oh, was that the buried treasure? A moment later, the light had faded. Out in the garden, then. But the trees spun darkness for a wandering beam of sun. So fine, so rare, coolly sunk beneath the surface, the beam I sought always burnt behind the glass. Death was the glass. Death was between us. Coming to the woman first, hundreds of years ago, leaving the house, sealing all the windows. The rooms were darkened. He left it, left her, went north, went east, saw the stars turned in the southern sky, sought the house, found it dropped beneath the downs. Safe, 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 the pulse of the house beat gladly. The treasure yours. The wind roars up the avenue. Trees stoop and bend this way and that. Moonbeams splash and spill wildly in the rain. But the beam of the lamp falls straight from the window. The candle burns stiff and still. Wandering through the house, opening the windows, whispering not to wake us, the ghostly couple seek their joy. "Here we slept," she says. And he adds, "Kisses without number. Waking in the morning. Silver between the trees. Upstairs. In the garden. When summer came. In winter snow time. The doors go shutting far in the distance, gently knocking like the pulse of a heart. Nearer they come, cease at the doorway. The wind falls, the rain slides silver down the glass. Our eyes darken. We hear no steps beside us. We see no lady spread her ghostly cloak. His hands shield the lantern. Look, he breathes, sound asleep, love upon their lips. Stooping, holding their silver lamp above us, long they look and deeply, long they pause. The wind drives straightly. The flame stoops slightly. Wild beams of moonlight cross both floor and wall, and, meeting, stain the faces bent. The faces pondering, the faces that search the sleepers and seek their hidden joy. Safe, 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 the heart of the house beats proudly. Long years, he sighs. Again you found me. Here, she murmurs, sleeping, in the garden, reading, laughing, rolling apples in the loft. Here we left our treasure. Stooping, their light lifts the lids upon my eyes. Safe, safe, safe. The pulse of the house beats wildly. Waking, I cry, "Oh, is this your buried treasure, the light in the heart?" Virginia Woolf. Adeline Virginia Woolf, née Stephen, 25 January 1882 to 28 March 1941, was an English writer who is considered one of the foremost modernists of the 20th century and a pioneer in the use of stream of consciousness as a narrative device. Born in an affluent household in Kensington, London, she attended King's College London and was acquainted with the early reformers of women's higher education. Having been homeschooled for much of her childhood, mostly in English classics and Victorian literature, Woolf began writing professionally in 1900. During the interwar period, Woolf was a significant figure in London literary society and a central figure in the influential Bloomsbury group of intellectuals. She published her first novel, titled The Voyage Out, in 1915, through the Hogarth Press, a publishing house that she established with her husband, Leonard Woolf. Her best-known works include the novels Mrs. Dalloway, 1925, To the Lighthouse, 1927, and Orlando, 1928, and the book-length essay A Room of One's Own, 1929, with its dictum, "A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction." Woolf became one of the central subjects of the 1970s movement of feminist criticism, and her works have since garnered much attention and widespread commentary for inspiring feminism, an aspect of her writing that was unheralded earlier. Her works are widely read all over the world and have been translated into more than 50 languages. She suffered from severe bouts of mental illness throughout her life and took her own life by drowning in 1941 at the age of 59. Works. Woolf is a major novelist and one of the pioneers among modernist writers using stream of consciousness as a narrative device, alongside her contemporaries Marcel Proust, Dorothy Richardson, and James Joyce. Woolf's reputation declined sharply after World War II, but her importance was re-established with the growth of feminist criticism in the 1970s. She began writing professionally in 1900. The first of her writings to be accepted for publication, Haworth, November 1904, a journalistic account of a visit to the Bronte family home at Haworth, was published anonymously in a women's supplement to a clerical journal, The Guardian, in December 1904. From 1905, she wrote for the Times literary supplement. Her first novel, The Voyage Out, was published in 1915 by her half-brother's imprint, Gerald Duckworth and Company Limited. This novel was originally titled Melimbrosia, but Woolf repeatedly changed the draft. An earlier version of The Voyage Out has been reconstructed by Woolf scholar Louise de Salvo and is now available to the public under the intended title. De Salvo argues that many of the changes Woolf made in the text were in response to changes in her own life. Woolf went on to publish novels and essays as a public intellectual to both critical and popular acclaim. Much of her work was self-published through the Hogarth Press. Virginia Woolf's peculiarities as a fiction writer have tended to obscure her central strength. She is arguably the major lyrical novelist in the English language. Her novels are highly experimental. A narrative, frequently uneventful and commonplace, is refracted, and sometimes almost dissolved, in the character's receptive consciousness. Intense lyricism and stylistic virtuosity fuse to create a world overabundant with auditory and visual impressions. The intensity of Virginia Woolf's poetic vision elevates the ordinary, sometimes banal settings, often wartime environments, of most of her novels. For example, Mrs. Dalloway, 1925, centers on the efforts of Clarissa Dalloway, a middle-aged society woman, to organize a party even as her life is paralleled with that of Septimus Warren Smith, a working-class veteran who has returned from the First World War, bearing deep psychological scars. To the Lighthouse, 1927, is set on 2 days, 10 years apart. The plot centers on the Ramsay family's anticipation of and reflection upon a visit to a lighthouse and the connected familial tensions. One of the primary themes of the novel is the struggle in the creative process that beset painter Lily Briscoe while she struggles to paint in the midst of the family drama. The novel is also a meditation upon the lives of a nation's inhabitants in the midst of war, and of the people left behind. It also explores the passage of time and how women are forced by society to allow men to take emotional strength from them. Orlando, 1928, is one of Virginia Woolf's lightest novels, a parodic biography of a young nobleman who lives for 3 centuries without aging much past 30, but who does abruptly turn into a woman. The book is in part a portrait of Woolf's lover, Vita Sackville West. It was meant to console Vita for the loss of her ancestral home, Knowle House, though it is also a satirical treatment of Vita and her work. In Orlando, the techniques of historical biographers are being ridiculed. The character of a pompous biographer is being assumed in order for it to be mocked. The Waves, 1931, presents a group of 6 friends whose reflections, which are closer to recitatives than to interior monologues proper, create a wave-like atmosphere that is more akin to a prose poem than to a plot-centered novel. Flush, a biography, 1933, is a part fiction, part biography of the Cocker Spaniel owned by Victorian poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning. The book is written from the dog's point of view. Woolf was inspired to write this book from the success of the Rudolph Bézier play, The Barretts of Wimpole Street. In the play, Flush is on stage for much of the action. The play was produced for the first time in 1932 by the actress Catherine Cornell. Her last work, Between the Acts, 1941, sums up and magnifies Woolf's chief preoccupations, the transformation of life through art, sexual ambivalence, and meditation on the themes of flux of time and life, presented simultaneously as corrosion and rejuvenation, all set in a highly imaginative and symbolic narrative encompassing almost all of English history. This book is the most lyrical of all her works, not only in feeling, but in style, being chiefly written in verse. While Woolf's work can be understood as consistently in dialogue with the Bloomsbury group, particularly its tendency, informed by G.E. Moore among others, towards doctrinaire rationalism, it is not a simple recapitulation of the coteries' ideals. Woolf's works have been translated into over 50 languages by writers such as Jorge Luis Borges and Marguerite Yourcenar. After completing the manuscript of her last posthumously published novel, Between the Acts, Woolf fell into a deep depression similar to that which she had earlier experienced. The onset of World War II, the destruction of her London home during the Blitz, and the cool reception given to her biography of her late friend Roger Fry all worsened her condition until she was unable to work. When Leonard enlisted in the Home Guard, he obtained the disapproval of Virginia, who held fast to her pacifism and criticized her husband for wearing what she considered to be the silly uniform of the Home Guard. After World War II began, Woolf's diary was consumed with an obsession with death, a subject that figured more and more as her mood darkened. On 28 March 1941, Woolf drowned herself by filling her overcoat pockets with stones and walking into the River Ouse near her home. Her body was not found until 18 April. Her husband buried her cremated remains beneath an elm tree in the garden of Monk's house, their home in Rodmell, Sussex. In her suicide note, addressed to her husband, she wrote, "Dearest, I feel certain that I am going mad again. I feel we can't go through another of those terrible times, and I shan't recover this time. I begin to hear voices, and I can't concentrate. So I am doing what seems the best thing to do. You have given me the greatest possible happiness. You have been in every way all that anyone could be. I don't think two people could have been happier till this terrible disease came. I can't fight any longer. I know that I am spoiling your life, that without me you could work, and you will, I know. You see, I can't even write this properly. I can't read. What I want to say is, I owe all the happiness of my life to you. You have been entirely patient with me and incredibly good. I want to say that. Everybody knows it. If anybody could have saved me, it would have been you. Everything has gone from me but the certainty of your goodness. I can't go on spoiling your life any longer. I don't think two people could have been happier than we have been.